Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I am your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today will be Seabass of WNWS of Jackson, Tennessee. This podcast presented by Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center. Wellspire offers personal and professional development opportunities in a beautiful facility in the Gulch neighborhood. Stop by for an event with world-renowned speakers or host an off-site event that will wow your team or your clients. We also thank our co-sponsor, the Well Coffee House, which turns coffee into water and has a mission to bring clean water to the world. Today's news sponsored by Sutherland & Belk, an SEC sports-loving injury firm in Nashville. These guys will shoot you straight on your rights and options when you've been injured in an accident. Call them at 615-846-6200 to get your questions answered. You may also visit them online at sbinjurylaw.com. There is a traffic advisory for Saturday's game with LSU. The interstate will be closed at the I-65 440 interchange, so go to viewcommodores.com for more information on routes to get to the stadium. Our guest line is presented by Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on Boll & Branch sheets for about 5 to 6 years now. They're phenomenal, and I had no idea what I was missing until I got them. The sheets are fair trade certified. That means they're made under safe conditions by men and women, treated and paid fairly. You can try them for a month and you can return them for free, but you're not going to want to. Once you get the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com, that's spelled B-O-L-L, enter the promo code Vandy, get $50 off your first set of sheets. Seabass joined us, as he does every week. He has a talk show in Jackson, Tennessee at WNWS. My friend, thanks for joining us. Glad you survived the Nashville heat. I'm not so glad that your Colts won, but I'm glad you were okay because that was a brutal experience for you. And welcome to our show today.
Oh, my God. Thank you for having me, first of all. It's always a pleasure to be here. Anchor down. I was at that game Sunday. I am not sad that the Colts won. I was stunned at how many Colts fans were there. And it made me think about our conversation that we had last week about people wanting to come here from opposite fan bases as a weekend thing and realize that even the Titans can't do a whole heck of a lot about that. But that's another discussion. But that was by far, the hottest I've ever been in my life in college. And I've been playing tournament volleyball for years in the sand. And I admit, I'm 47 years old now and I'm getting older, but that was the most unbearable. I think they said that it was the hottest Titans game on record in that franchise's history. And people were just needing help left and right. And a lot of people you just couldn't, they had to check out. We had people around us who were leaving. They was like, man, I can't do this. And I actually watched the fourth quarter in the concourse. It was just too hot.
I might have to dispute that hottest game on record for the Titans because, in fact, I'm sitting here looking at a picture in my office at my house. It was the Titans' first game ever at the stadium. Well, I know, I've heard that. I'm just thinking, I was there for that Bengals game, the first game they played in the new stadium. It had to have been at least 93 that day. I remember how miserably hot it was. Maybe it was. I'm sure they keep records of these things, but that game had to be close, and I still remember how hot it was that day. But let me segue to something else on that topic, and it does have the obvious Vanderbilt overlap here. Let me start with, what was the breakdown for the crowd? How many people were there? Was it sold out? And what percentage were Colts fans?
It wasn't sold out, but there was a lot of people there. There's no doubt. But it wasn't a sellout. I think the weather had a lot to do with that. And, I've been talking to friends. I would say 70-30 Titans.
Man, so that means what, 20,000 Colts fans?
Oh, dude, they were everywhere.
Well, probably 15 is more like it, yeah, but good grief.
All I can go is by what I saw, and I'd say out of every 10 people, I'd say 3 of them were Colts fans, and I think that's fair. I think that's about right. I know it certainly was where I was, but I was so stunned by that because, Peyton Manning hasn't played for the Colts since 2011.
Yeah, I wonder how many of those were people traveling down from Indy. I would think that number wouldn't have been as big given the Andrew Luck news and everything. I don't know how many residual Colts fans are left over from the Manning era, but that's interesting.
Yeah, there was. I did not expect that number. I was a little taken aback. I was okay with it, but I was a little taken aback to see that. That one caught me off guard. And if people listen to this podcast that were at the game, maybe you can give me an idea. Maybe my numbers are off, but I don't think so. But the one thing about it is that with them both being blue and white, you know what I mean? Now you probably have a better idea of, like, say it was a red team or something like that, and you saw them wearing the red. It would show out more and you could see, but I mean, I'll stick with that number 70-30. At worst, 75-25.
Well, and I think you're right about the implications for Vanderbilt being that this is more of an it destination, and people circle this on their calendars to make the road trip. And I do agree with that. That's more of a factor than it was 20 years ago. However, some of that I think also relates to mediocre football. I mean, the Titans have been bad or mediocre for 12 to 15 years now, really ever since that last run with Steve McNair. They've not been very good, and I think that has a say in it too. And, of course, the parallel to Vanderbilt would be obvious.
Look, people want to be involved with the winner. That's always going to be the case. There's no doubt. It's just that, I mean, if I lived anywhere even remote, if I was a fan of another team, and I'm sticking with the Titans right here, if I was a fan of any other team, and I'm looking at that schedule, and I'm going to travel to one road game, I'm going to take a look at that. And I'm going to say, and I'm going to look at these cities. I'm going to say, golly, man, that's Nashville. So if I'm in Atlanta and I'm in New Orleans, maybe even if I'm in Dallas, or if I'm living in North Florida, if I'm in Carolina, that Nashville game, Cincinnati, Cleveland, that Nashville game looks awful attractive to me as that one game that I'm going to travel.
Well, and I've said this before, and I think it's been when we have done a podcast, I think the one thing that does not get talked about enough is that Vanderbilt's alumni base is mostly out of the area, and I think they are missing an opportunity to market that to their own fans. Say, hey, come back to campus, come back and see how much Nashville has changed, spend a weekend, we'll come up with some sort of package. I mean, it's not like every person who lives out of town is a fan of the opposing team. Vanderbilt's got a ton of its own fans, and it's got to figure out a way to tap into that itself. Nobody ever talks about that, but I don't understand why you can't sell that to your own fans. Is pick a game or two and come back and experience Nashville. It's not just that only fans of opposing teams like to visit Nashville. Market to your own portion of your fan and alumni base that's out of town.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, one of the things that it leaves me miffed, but it makes me happy in this sense that I know we're capable, is the way that we've traveled in bowls.
Well, I know, and I think a lot of people take the bowl trip and that's it. I think that I shouldn't say a lot, I don't know, but I think you have a lot of people that take their one football trip a year and it's to that bowl game wherever it is. And sometimes the Texas Bowl, a lot of your alumni base, I think, happens to be living in and around Houston. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. But I love the fact that it says, okay, we have a lot of people that are interested in this program and that are willing to travel to go watch it, So, I mean, sometimes it looks like that we have no fans at all. I mean, we clearly do. Just drawing them in is on a consistent basis is the $64,000 question, the big mystery.
Well, and there's just been no consistency over the last 60 or 70 years. Again, we could do a whole podcast, but just it's not just a Derek Mason thing. I think that a lot of fans have tuned him out, but it's not just that. It's the lack of consistent things. And people have said, oh, when Franklin showed up and won, they still didn't put up the numbers. Again, you go back to the background. It takes a while to build a fan base, but we've done that show a couple times. Let me ask you, now that you've had 2 weeks to think about it, to sort of recenter expectations, to calm down, because I know you were pretty hot after the Purdue game. Has your opinion on this team or this season changed at all?
If I say yes, will that make you happy?
No, I don't care. I just asked the question because it's interesting
Yeah,
podcasting, I
okay.
think.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, yes, you're right. You're right. I mean, look, the story isn't written. This thing's not. We're 2 games in. We're 2 games in, and one of them's Georgia. I mean, now I did say, as a lot of people did, that Purdue would tell us a lot more about what we need to know, and I didn't like what I found out. So sure. I mean, I have to readjust just my expectation. It'd be stupid not to. And clearly, now here's what I will say: there's no way you knew LSU was this good offensively. There's no way you knew it, because this is a completely new LSU. I mean, I understand that Burrow's still there. I get all that. But what we're seeing out of them, just approach wise, it's just not what they've done for years, especially under Coach O. And now all of a sudden, it's like, man, Katie bar the door. We've got a legit quarterback. We've got a guy who can get it all over the field and distribute the football. We can run the ball like we always been able to. And oh yeah, we still play. Well, I would say we still play pretty good defense, but maybe that was a product of how good Texas is, and that was just the game situation. But I don't know who could possibly have seen the offensive explosion coming from LSU, at least early on, that we've seen so far.
The reason I think that's almost an impossible win for them is the efficiency for which they're completing passes. Burrow was 31 of 39 for 471 against Texas. When you were moving the chains with that kind of regularity, which, by the way, Vanderbilt does not, I mean, that's just barring a disaster with turnovers. Unless Vanderbilt finds a way to really cut into that number, there's no way.
Yeah. It's. I mean, I can't dispute that. I don't anticipate them winning this football game by any stretch of the imagination. What I need to see, though, man, I need to see a performance that was twice as good as what I saw at West Lafayette, which still probably wouldn't even be close enough to winning this football game. But I need to see us pointed in the right direction. I don't have illusions of winning this game, but you just can't sit there and get gashed up and down the field and give up like the numbers that you gave last week. I bet the median over all the number that you went over would have started with a 5 or close to it, which is mind blowing. I need to see some progression here. Now, unfortunately, we're down a few guys for the year, but I need to see a couple of guys who are now starting to get used to playing on Saturdays and getting the reps, and I need to see that translate into successful reps against a team that's clearly got them outclassed at just about every position on the field. I just need to see a gritty effort. Give me something, give me some imagination. And offensively, hey, I think I read something about Riley starting to pick up a few things from the Purdue game until now, especially with the off week. Let me see that, go down swinging. If they do what they do and it's not enough, then I have to live with that at the end of the day. What I won't be okay with is trying to take it at LSU in tight formation and trying to go run over them and put themselves, with predictable play calling that keeps them behind the chains all the time. They go out there, give everything they got, and it's just not enough because it's just not enough. I can live with that. I promise I can. It's a top 5 football team they're playing.
Well, the issue with the schedule has really cause a lot of issues with trying to evaluate and predict. I mean, again, we said that the Purdue game was the fair fight. That's what we judged them on. Well, it's still only one game. I guess if you're looking for a more positive spin, and I'm not trying to spin things here, I'm just trying to look at it from every angle. You never say that things can't get worse because things can always get worse. But the penalties, they're leading the country in penalties. I don't think that'll happen. They don't have a sack yet. They're going to have at least a couple of sacks by the end of the year. The health situation with the offensive line and the experience, it's hard for that to get better. I guess to sum it up, if you were to kind of score their season so far on a 0 to 100 scale of 100 being the best case outcome based on what we knew and a 0 being the worst, where would you score their season, if that makes sense? I've got my number, but I'm not going to share it until I hear yours, just so I don't influence it.
Okay, I think I know my number, but would you mind phrasing the question one more time? Just because I think I have my number, but you go ahead.
Well, if a 0 is like coming into the season, what is if everything absolutely went wrong? They score a 0 for the year. If 100 is like everything that possibly could have gone well for them went well, and maybe beyond that. If you're scoring the season based on expectations from, I guess we'll say 1 to 100, where would you put what they've
Okay.
done so far, given the entirety of the injuries, the penalties, and everything?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so we're going to 100.
Right.
Okay.
With the 100 being maybe
All
they
right.
upset Georgia by some crazy, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I got you now. I can taste what you're cooking. Man, I'm living between 35 and 40% and 35 and 40. I'm gonna go with 35. I'm gonna go with 35. Before I explain, how far off was I from your number?
Oh, I would go probably 15 to 20. And this is the reason
Okay.
why I just thought with all their offensive weapons, they would find a way to do more than they've done and put more points on the board. I just thought that when you have three guys like that you have to stop, that just was going to be next to impossible to keep them from putting up points. I've said all along I thought the defense would be lousy. Then you throw in the injuries and the penalties. So like if 50 was your midpoint expectation, they've not moved the ball and scored as consistently as I thought they would. You throw in the horrible stuff with the penalties and the injuries, and I think that's about where I settle. Now, maybe that'll end up being a harbinger of what they are, but compared to what I thought they were coming in, I think that's where I am.
Okay, so here's where I'm going to go with mine. Okay, here's where I'm going to amass my 35. So I'm going to sit at 35 because these are the things that I've been pleased with, but have been all right for me. One, I think Deshaun Jerkins has looked really good. I think he's got a lot of potential. I think Dio has just flashed a little bit. I think transfer wise, I think our two corners transfer wise are, kind of great, but I think they're pretty good. I think they can definitely progress as the season goes. It's brief flashes, but Paulino Ball I think has a chance. Chris Pierce looks better than he did last year, and I think that's going to continue to be the case as the year goes on. At least in the Georgia game, this team didn't give up. Of course, it was what it was, but we didn't get Riley Neal killed. So look, there's nothing. This team isn't doing anything great. I thought Riley Gay was good, kicking the football in field goal situations. So there was certainly that. I think Riley Neal flashes potential. I think he's got ways to go, but I think the potential is certainly there. So there are some things that warrant a little bit of praise, but clearly this team has a long way to go. There's no question about that, but there are things to like about this football team. There are.
Well, right now they are about a 23.5-point underdog against LSU. I think we both agree, barring something just crazy, they're not going to win that game. So what is a realistic expectation for what you want to see against LSU that would make you feel better?
You hold this team to under 30 points, which I think is a whole lot to ask. But hold this team to 30 points and put up a couple of scores. If I walk out of there and I'm losing, 28-14, 31-14, I'll live with that. They're just a better football team than we are. They're working they're cooking with much more expensive groceries. I will live with that. What I won't live with is just the same old, get pushed around, the stupid penalties that have beset this team, unfortunately, somehow for this year. And little things like that will drive me nuts. But, they get out of there 28-14, 31-14, I'll live with it. I hate to have that attitude because that's not how I view sports, but, I also have to be realistic.
What number do you expect to see on the LSU when the final score is in? How many points do you think they're going to score?
38.
Yeah, I think that's too low.
Do you? Well,
I mean, they got, 38 against Texas, so. No, I'm sorry. They got 45 against Texas. Excuse me.
Yeah, they got 45 to 38 was the final in that game. And they did, and that's fine. I certainly agree with that. But, I don't know. Maybe they slow it up a little bit. Of course, their drives may they may just say, you know what, here we're going to turn around, hand off the ball, and just get you 6-7 yards at a time. I don't know. Look, Chris, I mean, it's not like I said 20 or something. Like a 38 is still a very high number. Now maybe they hit 4+. I don't know, but conservatively speaking, which I can't believe 38 is being conservative, but it probably is. So I'm gonna stick with that. I'm gonna say 38.
They haven't really let off the gas against anybody, have they? I mean, they've thrown. Let's see. They've run 97 times and they have thrown 111. So, I mean, I guess it's more balanced than I thought.
Plus they, I won't say sputtered, but for a little bit in that game against Northwestern State, for a few minutes, I suppose. But no, look, I get it, man. I mean, but what do you want me to say? 65?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, again, it was an open-ended question. I don't much trust their defense right now, which is not a surprise. I mean, again, it comes back to me to how many can you put on the board. So,
I mean, because see, here's the thing. You talk about that 45, but they also gave up 38. It's not like their defense looks like the best LSU defense that we've ever seen. I mean, they've been flexible this year. You can move the football on this team. And even though we haven't exactly lit it on fire, we still have 5. We still have 16. We still have 80. We're still capable of moving the football.
No, that is true. And I don't think their front 3 or 4, their defensive line is what it's usually been. They do have 8 sacks. They do have an All-American safety and All-American corner, though, and that's what concerns me is that, how much do you want the ball in the air against those guys? And they've not been able to, Vanderbilt has not been able to run it. So I don't know. It just doesn't look good right now. Maybe 2 weeks off will be the tonic they need to play better. I don't know. Again, it all goes back to the way the schedule's set up, and we said we don't have much to evaluate them on. It's got to be the Purdue game, and that just didn't leave me a lot to be encouraged with, along with their recent history of defending and offensive innovation. So, again, I'm not going to bury them for the season, but obviously, if you watch them, those are concerns.
Yeah, and I think that you mentioned talent, man. I think that Grant Delpit's one of the best players that Vanderbilt will see all year long. He's a stud. He will hurt you if you leave the receiver out to dry. He will hurt him. He's one of the best players in the country. I think he's a first rounder. I'm pretty positive of that. I really like watching Grant Delpit play.
Anything else before we go to the mailbag?
Well, you asked me what I thought. Now I'm returning the question to you. Give me your number. What number do you see LSU putting up?
I'm thinking 44.
So one touchdown more than what I was saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
maybe a hot day. You see them slow things down a little bit, and the heat keeps the score down a little bit. But I just don't see their defense right now. I mean, I don't mean to nitpick, but you just talked about the secondary was kind of a bright spot, which I generally agree with a lot of those things. I think the corners have shown some things. I think that Deshaun Jerkins has certainly shown some things. But man, they still gave up 509 yards after making Purdue one-dimensional. So it's like anything that you can even take away from it that's a bright spot, you have to kind of temper with what we've seen. And I don't mean to pile on, but it just is what it is.
We need these guys need to win a game because, I mean, man, this is brutal. this is brutal, dude.
I'm trying to remember, before the start of the season, we were picking like the key games of the year. I want to say maybe I said the game at Ole Miss. Maybe I'm misremembering that, but man, I think that game really will be the key because Ole Miss has discovered a defense. I mean, look, if they don't beat Northern Illinois, it's over. They might win 2 or 3 games. In fact, they would anyway. But, I mean, you don't win that game, then, man, it really gets ugly. And that's not a game that's an automatic win. But that Ole Miss game suddenly, Ole Miss will probably be favored heading into that given the way the defense is played and given that it's home. But I don't know if I called that game before the year as being the key game. It seems like I did. Maybe I'm not remembering that correctly. But it sure seems to be setting up that way right now, again, given the dynamics of the schedule.
Yeah, some of these teams look a little bit better than thought they might. Kentucky, the Troy transfer looks like he could help them out a little bit. We'll see with Ole Miss, man. It was a pretty even game with Memphis, but Memphis was clearly the better team there. And then the other one was Arkansas. I mean, it's Arkansas. So we'll see. I'm not saying that they're not this, they're not that, but I'm for me right now, I'm focusing just on this football team, and I'll just say this: the 2 games so far, it doesn't really. I mean, outside of ETSU, I mean, it doesn't make me think, oh, well, we definitely got. I don't think there's a game that we can say that's a win. And I hope the UNLV one too, but and Northern Illinois. But as far as the conference games go, I mean, I've seen all the other teams, and I don't know. We don't look like they do. We just don't look like they do. But that's just right now. I mean, this team can still turn things around. I mean, it's 2 games in. It's 2 dead gum games in. I'm not writing the book on this team, not by sight.
Let's go to the mailbag, which is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan and independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood. If you need auto, home, motorcycle, renters, landlord, life, commercial insurance, Josh can help you out there. Call him 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. He is my insurance agent. Give him a try. I think you'll be pleased. Tell him you heard about it on this show. Vandy Savage says, if Vandy loses to LSU, can it win 6 out of the remaining 9 games to get to a bowl? Which games are most likely? And has Vanderbilt ever started 0-3 and gone to a bowl?
The last question, I don't know. The first question, if they lose to LSU, can they go 6-3 the rest of the way and get to a bowl game? Yes, they can. What are the most likely wins? ETSU, Northern Illinois,
UNLV.
Chris. UNLV, yeah, that's the other one. I think you have to throw Tennessee in there. Kentucky's not an unwinnable football game. I will say this to you about South Carolina, man. I kind of thought that when Jake Bentley went down, that kind of changed that team completely. But I'll just tell you this. I thought they fought their butts off against Alabama. I don't know if you had a chance to see that game. I know you're out of town. And I know the score got away from them. But South Carolina played their butts off. They did. They were just facing completely superior talent. But they played hard, and they played well for a backup quarterback. It looked pretty comfortable, to be honest with you. But it's not an unwinnable we don't have any unwinnable football games unless you're going to tell me that you can't win in the swamp against this team. Now, I will say this to you. I thought that Florida, when Trask came in for Felipe Franks, which just feel terrible for Felipe, but thought they moved the football well. And they did. I mean, do they win that game if Felipe Franks doesn't get hurt? I can't say yes to that. I don't know that. They also plan, now we'll see what happens, but if you listen to Dan Mullen, they plan on getting Emory Jones involved in this game as well, too. So I don't know. Missouri's looked good, and they've also been beaten by Wyoming. So I look at the rest of the schedule. Yes, when we lose to LSU, if that's the case, and we do, and we have to go 6-3 down the stretch to get in a bowl game, 6-3 is not generally something Vanderbilt produces, but from a can they standpoint, yeah, sure they can.
Yeah, and again, I said before the season, I thought they would start 0-3 and make a bowl anyway, but I did not expect as ugly a 0-2 as we've gotten so far. So that does affect the way I see it, which leads to the next question. Vandy Doors Ned wants to know both of our predictions game by game for this season. So let's make this easy. Is it fair to say we both see them beating ETSU, UNLV, Northern Illinois, and Tennessee, and probably in descending order of easiest win to toughest win? Is that fair?
I'm not going to. Well, let me just say this. I know they lost to Georgia State, and last Saturday is almost irrelevant because it's UTC, but I thought they executed well. They did not play horribly against BYU until the money was on the line at the very end. For the most part of that game, they played pretty well. I guess that question I have to ask myself is right now, who would I favor in Nashville today, BYU or Vanderbilt? Can you definitely tell me Vanderbilt?
No, I can't.
No,
in fact, I probably would favor BYU at this point.
There's a chance you'd probably favor BYU at this point. So, and Tennessee had to work hard, but they found a way to give that game away. But I'm not writing that game off at this point in time. Now, there's a lot of things that we're going to see between now and then, but I'm not writing that in the books as much as I want to, and as a win. I can't do that yet.
So 3 wins?
I can't do that game any more than I can't mark that as a certainty any more than I can Kentucky, or Ole Miss or anybody else.
No, I don't think it's a certainty either. I'm just saying that given the way that Vanderbilt's closed the season, its recent history, I would still pick them to win that game right now. And again, I'm consistent. I've said it works the same way in reverse for South Carolina. Carolina's just had their number. No way I'm picking Vanderbilt to win that game. Now, look, South Carolina's domination over Vanderbilt has been a lot longer than Tennessee's has, but that's kind of my point of reference for both those games.
And it's certainly understood. It's just, the kind of question was, well, can we take these 4 and say we agree on that? To me, that game is a toss-up right now. So I'm not, if you press me right now and say who you taking, I'm taking Vanderbilt. Because I still think they're the better football team at this point. I don't think Jeremy Pruitt's figured it out quite yet. But if you make me say one, I will say Vanderbilt in that game. So, yeah, that would be – I'll say that one, and I guess that would be number 4.
Yeah, I think we're in the same place on that game. I don't think this is a 2 or 3 win team. I also don't think it's a 6-win team. Certainly not a 6-win team right now. Really, right now, it's more like a 3 to 4 win team. I think they're better than they've shown. I'm going to say they get one more between Ole Miss or Kentucky. I want to go Ole Miss just because of history, but right now I don't see 6. Do you? I mean, that could they get it? Yes, but trying to balance what I thought of them coming in, figuring they're going to get better because they're not going to lead the country in penalties. They're going to get better on offense, I think. But there's some things that provide a damper. Yeah, I mean, they're still banged up on the offensive line. They've not played discipline. They've not showed any coaching innovation or anything there that makes you think that this coaching staff right now is going to provide some sort of an edge. So I think this is man, if I had to set over-under on wins for the rest of the year, I'd probably go 4.5.
I'd be interested to see what the board would say to that in regards of what direction they would go if that were the betting line right now. Which way the money would go. I don't know. I don't know. I think that could be a 50-50 proposition right there.
Well, right now the board is just ticked off, which is not a good time to make a decision. And I understand it. I could even defend it to a large degree. I mean, people aren't happy. This was actually a team that came in that had some legitimate reason for expectation, but we knew all along, okay, you're going to have to go all out on your offense and how you approach it. And not only have they not done that, but they've just looked bad at times.
They have. I do not dispute that. They have looked very bad at times. It's been a couple of weeks. They've had the bye week to get what ails them right. And again, the competition may be a little bit more than they can ask. But that's why when you ask me what would I be satisfied with, refining their game and improving the areas and knocking off the penalties and not turning the football over and not getting bowled over at the point of attack. These are things that are fixable. The question is, what did we learn from 14 days ago or however many days ago it was in West Lafayette? And how much different does this team look? Because even if they get beat by a far superior team, you're still going to be able to tell whether or not it's the same old Vanderbilt or they look. Because remember what Derek Mason said, that he thought that he had his deepest team that he's ever had at Vanderbilt. Well, okay, now it's time to see that. If that's the case, and I'm not saying that it's not, let's see that. Show it to me. Let's see the deepest team in Vanderbilt, Derek Mason's tenure at Vanderbilt.
So if you're setting over under for wins for the rest of the year, what's the number you're setting?
I think you set the number right. I felt like you set the exactly right number when you said 4.5. That's where I would go to.
Man, it's really too early to have this discussion, but I can't help but think of it. They have to do better than that. Because what do you do at that point? You've got a coach who's not going anywhere. I mean, I say he's not going anywhere. You never know. But barring something crazy like a 1 or 2 win season, they're committed to him for the foreseeable future. If they can't win more than 4 or 5 this year, they're not doing it next year. For a fan base that's shrinking and isn't showing up to games, I think this next month or so is really critical for them.
Oh, I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, that's why I don't want to say that I want to fast forward past LSU, but I mean, I think as from a fan, you almost have to, I mean, and get a very winnable football game against somebody it's not like you're playing Seahorse Tech, I mean, Northern Illinois is not what they used to be, but they can provide you with some competition, and make you work a little bit. And this fan base just needs something positive to keep them going. And by the way, it's not a knock on us because there's no fan base in the country that would be solidified and unified and hyped up about Saturdays and ready to go if they hadn't endured the same thing. There's not one. There's zero. There's nobody, not anybody. It's not human. It would completely fight against human nature. That's not what people do when it comes to football. So I take it. I personally take it easy on us for that, and maybe that's the wrong approach and the wrong thing to do. But I just feel like, the ones of us that are still here are the most resilient college football fans and maybe in the country, because even the other bad teams and other conferences don't deal with what we deal with that I know of, that I've ever seen.
No, and
I've never seen other places whose especially in Power 5 conferences whose stadium are completely overran with the other team. I've never seen that anywhere before.
Yeah, I think it's got to be of all the Power 5 teams since World War II, can you think of any that have had a tougher existence than Vanderbilt? I mean, there have been some high points in there. The Franklin years, the 82 team, but there's been no sustained run. Like, I'm trying to think of teams that have had tough times. Baylor, in the 80s was awful, but had a pretty good run under Art Briles. Of course, that was his own animal. I'm thinking like Washington State, which has had a good run under Mike Leach and had a good run in the 90s when it went to the Rose Bowl. I mean, I bet you if you looked at every other Power 5 school, like Purdue's not been very good, but had Drew Brees. That was a pretty good time for Purdue in the late 90s. Indiana under Bill Mallory was good. I'm thinking of even the worst Power 5 programs. I bet all of them since World War II have had a peak that was better than what Vanderbilt's had. And then you add the attendance thing, getting overrun in your own stadium. I think for the last 70 years or so, it has probably been the toughest fan existence in the Power 5.
Yeah, I'm actually a little bit proud of us. Just the fact that we still have some folks around. I'm proud of that.
Yeah, and that's why think the trashing of the Vanderbilt fan base a lot of times is just unnecessary because, like, okay, look at Tennessee. They've had a bad decade now, but, I mean, at least in there was a top 25 finish or two, and at least they can still remember, times when it was good. They had a national title. What's the best memory around for Vanderbilt fans alive? It was a 3-year stretch with Franklin. I mean, it just nobody has to deal with what their fan base has to deal with.
Nope, nobody else in the country. I 100% agree.
All right, my man, let me let you get out of here. If you got any parting thoughts, feel free to close with those. And if not, tell us where to find you on Twitter and where to find your show.
Well, just man, that I will see you guys Saturday, man. Now, here's the deal. I want to do a little bit of tailgating. I plan on getting into town about 9:15 or something like that. Me and the boys are coming in from the 731, and I want to get together, man. Let's hang out, man. I want to. So if there's what I'm trying to say is, if there's any type of like Vandy sports get together or something like that, man, I want to meet some of the folks, man. Hang out with everybody before the game.
All right, my friend. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next week.
All right.
He is Seabass. I'm Chris Lee. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast.